Module 8, Reader Benefits. Reader benefits are a very important part of business writing. What are they? What's a reader benefit? I often think of reader benefits as buy-in. They're reasons for people to comply with the new policy that's being enacted or whatever information that you are trying to present to them, or reasons to act upon the information. And so because of that, reader benefits are really only used in informative or positive or persuasive messages. And so we frequently see reader benefits in positive or informative messages where we want to shape the reader's attitude toward the information that we're giving them, or in persuasive messages where we have to overcome some reader objections and really sell to them the idea of why they should comply or act with what we're asking. There are 4 criteria for effective reader benefits. First of all, reader benefits have to be adapted specifically to the audience that you're writing to. This means that they should be appropriate to the age, the concerns, the values, the beliefs, and the situation that the audience is involved in. Most effective reader benefits are based on intrinsic benefits, and we'll talk about that in a future slide. The other key thing about reader benefits is that, and this is really, really important, they only work if they're supported by clear logic and explained in detail. And so if you don't actually do that, then you're just stating a feature rather than actually selling the benefit to the reader. Finally, reader benefits, effective reader benefits, are phrased in you attitude, which will be covered in Module 6. And Module 6 will talk more about how you attitude really helps you to write the information from the reader's point of view, really underscoring that audience awareness. I mean, reader benefits are all about writing for your audience. Benefits overcome audiences' problems with motivation. Basically, as our book describes, expectancy theory is that people will try or comply or act in the best way that they can in response to a request when they believe that success is possible and they want the rewards associated with it. And so that's expectancy theory. We basically follow through when there's an expectancy of success and reward. And so reader benefits help with motivation. They help the person to comply with the policy. They help the person to act upon the request in a persuasive message. And specifically, benefits make the relationships between the action and the reward clear. That's really, though, based on how well you develop them and explain the logic. So how many benefits should you have in any message? You should brainstorm more than you use. You'll brainstorm 3 to 5 for informative messages and 5 to 7 for persuasive messages. And basically, that's because when you are trying to persuade someone, it takes more selling, it takes a bigger pitch. And so you need more and more developed benefits for persuasive than informative messages. However, in any of those messages, you want to develop fully approximately 2 to 3 of the key benefits. And that means a full paragraph of 3 to 5 sentences. We'll talk about what to include in a future slide, but it's really important to remember that a feature by itself is not a benefit. So for instance, if I tell you, oh, hey, as part of your benefits, you'll get a paperclip, that doesn't really tell me what it's good for, what it does for me. I don't know if this cultural reference will make sense to you, but MacGyver could use paper clips for many, many things, but there was a lot of explanation and detail included to get from point A to point B, from like a paper clip to how to use that to pick a lock. And so just describing a paper clip, a feature, that's not a reader benefit. You can't just say, hey, you'll get more time off. You have to really describe what that time off will do for the reader and give evidence and details. What kind of benefits are effective? Okay, first of all, you should include at least one benefit that applies to each of your audience members. So if you have both primary and secondary audiences, you want to consider what the secondary audience might need in order to be convinced, as well as your primary audience. Key are intrinsic benefits, and I'll talk about those in a moment. But again, we really want to think about intrinsic benefits as the kind of benefits you want to emphasize. And in selecting which benefits that you can use out of the ones that you brainstormed, you want to use the ones you can fully develop. Explain the logic fully, provide the evidence and details, explain the link to the reader, and note that the reader will always believe their own experience over what you tell them, so you don't want to lie to them or give false promises, okay? You don't want to blow smoke. Basically, benefits should be really concrete. They should be related to the reader. They should be linked to intrinsic or internal motivations. They should be fully described, and they should be deliverable. Okay, they should not be false promises. All right, so what's an intrinsic benefit? Intrinsic rewards versus extrinsic rewards is really the difference between things that are kind of external to us, things that motivate us in the physical world, versus intrinsic or internal motivations, which have more to do with our beliefs and values and our sense of self. Okay, and as they found in research, it sounds contradictory, but it's really true, is that people are much more motivated by intrinsic versus extrinsic rewards. So while it may seem that, offering someone a raise is a good reward or benefit, if that comes at the expense of actually having time for their family, of actually doing something that they love, you know what? It turns out that people are not as motivated by extrinsic rewards as they are by kind of things that ratify who they are as a person and things that meet their value system. And this is really based on a concept from psychology called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It is true that when people are at kind of the basic level, we want to have our physiological or physical needs met first. And so if people are at a place where those are in danger, they're going to be totally focused on extrinsic or physical rewards. But once we get to a certain level of satisfaction, whereas, for instance, I guess what I would say is when you're first starting out on the job search, and if you've been unemployed for a long time, you might take any job just because you're at the point where you really need to pay rent and be able to buy your groceries. You're at the lowest level of Maslow's hierarchy, and so extrinsic rewards are really motivators. However, once you've achieved a certain level of safety and security, you have your apartment set up, you have your groceries in your fridge, you're feeling pretty self-satisfied about your life, you start to move toward the intrinsic rewards. And that's where most workers are at. They aren't living paycheck to paycheck per se. They've got most of their life kind of figured out. And so what becomes even more important are these intrinsic motivators that have to do with having time for friends and family, that have to do with being able to do the things that make them fulfilled, to work in a career that's rewarding to them, to have, opportunities to really perform at their best at work and be rewarded and acknowledged for that. And then self-actualization is when we get that whole cake. We have both our extrinsic, our physical needs met, as well as we are an integrated member of our community. We feel that we have a good work-life balance, and we're able to use our best talents in a way that benefits our community and that we're also rewarded and acknowledged for. And so basically, as I mentioned, most of us are actually at the point, most workers are at the point where we're working on an intrinsic level, although it's also true that sometimes, we are at that extrinsic or physical level. However, we have found that these intrinsic benefits are actually the highest motivators for people. So you want to link your benefits to those intrinsic motivators. And in terms of what you actually say in your writing, in a paragraph, right, that's fully developed, as it mentioned before, you'll have 3 to 5 sentences for a fully developed reader benefit, and you'll have 2 to 3 of these in any message. So for instance, in your assignment, it asks you to write at least 4 paragraphs, and that would include 1, your introduction, and then 2 fully developed reader benefits, one of which will be a psychological description, and then 4th, your closing paragraph. It may be that you use your psychological description to introduce the CareerLink website, and so you might have a 5th paragraph, but you want to have at least 2 to 3 fully developed reader benefits paragraphs, and these frequently go in the body or middle toward the bottom of your organization. As we mentioned earlier, you'll have your purpose, you want to have your details, sandwich any negatives in the middle, and you want to end with really strong reader benefits and then a goodwill close. Reader benefit paragraphs that are strong begin with the benefit itself, the claim of what is going to be given to or achieved by the reader if they follow through on the request, but then you have to actually give the evidence or details. What do you mean by this? You get time off. What are the details of that? What is the evidence that will actually benefit the reader? And this is the key thing. If you do not actually link at the very end of the paragraph how the benefit actually relates to the reader, you've lost the reader. That's the logic and details that is required in order to make for effective benefit paragraph. A handout that I'll give to you in class that talks more specifically about this is that the body paragraphs of any document are usually where the details or key points are located, but in order to be effective, and this is true of any body paragraphs, you have to have not only the claim, but explain how the evidence supports it and how that links to the main purpose or audience's needs. Not including evidence, examples, and an explanation of their link to the claim and main purpose forces your readers to take your word for it or assume what you say is true, which is not something that they're inclined to do. Your job as a writer is to show the reader how what you say is true, and that's that link. You have to actually explicitly and specifically describe and explain the benefit and how it relates to the reader. Providing this evidence is the easiest way to accomplish that reader belief and convince them, okay? So this is another handout. Then we'll do this exercise in class and try to, strategize some reader benefits here. But basically, as our book says, a reader benefit is a claim or assertion that the reader will benefit if he or she does something. Convincing the reader, therefore, involves 2 steps: making sure the benefit really will occur, no false promises, and explaining it to the reader. So claim or benefit, the evidence that it's logical and true, and then a link to the reader. Without that, just an empty promise. The reader isn't inclined to believe you, they're much more inclined to believe their own personal experience. Now, a type of reader benefit that's really specific is a psychological description. And that is where you actually use modifiers and sense details in order to create a scenario that puts the reader in the picture. And I'll give you an example of that here. This is an ad by AMC that is meant to put you in to the place. So here you are in the movie theater, you're drinking your Coke, you're feeling relaxed, you're ready to have this movie theater experience. And AMC really uses all of these details and all of this actually like visual imagery to make you feel as though going to the movie theater is really actually being transported to another world. Sorry about that. I don't seem to be able, there we go, to get rid of our ad here. Okay. The other thing that you want to include in reader benefits is, as I mentioned before, you attitude. I'm going to talk about that more in Module 6, but it's when you write from the reader's point of view and you actually use the pronoun you in order to draw the reader in, just like a psychological description is. You really want to put the reader into your document. All right, that concludes our presentation for Module 8, and we'll talk more about you attitude in Module 6.